Alright, new day, new deck here on Maze MTG. We've got another Singleton deck tech for you now for the Storm the Citadel event on MTG Arena. No, I haven't got the description wrong. This deck is Singleton legal. You may have noticed, however, we are playing 36 copies of a card that isn't a basic land, and that card is Persistent Petitioners. So if you were familiar with the Pauper event before this card got banned, or you've seen something like Rat Colony being played previously, you might have an idea of what's going on here with Persistent Petitioners. The bottom ability on this card says that a deck can have any number of cards named Persistent Petitioners, and that overrides any other format's rules. So in normal, standard, modern, etc., you can have any number of Persistent Petitioners rather than just 4. In Singleton, it overrides the 1 copy cap. While we could make the deck something like 37, 38 Persistent Petitioners and just land, I wanted to include some spice, some innovation of my own. So I was thinking, sometimes we're going to have 3 lands, 5 lands, we're not going to want to use the 1 mana activated ability of the Petitioners to put a single card from the top of our opponent's deck into the graveyard, so what can we do with 1 mana? Well, we have Spell Pierce to potentially catch something like a Kaya's Wrath or a Cleansing Nova that's going to set our board back to 0, or Dive Down to protect a Petitioner from a piece of removal, or let us block more profitably in combat, especially if we've got a multi-block going on with more than 1 Persistent Petitioner. So the question everybody thinks when they see a deck like this is, well, how does it win? Why do you want to be playing 36 copies of Persistent Petitioners? And the answer is the second ability on this card. As you can see, Persistent Petitioners is a human advisor, and by tapping for untapped advisors you control, which can include summoning sick advisors, you can have target player put the top 12 cards of their library into their graveyard. Unless your opponent's deck's set up in a way to mitigate the effects of Persistent Petitioners, they're going to be playing a 60-card deck. By the time they've drawn their opening hand, you've got a few turns into the game, 4 or 5 activations, it's going to be game over when they come to their draw step, and they do whiff. So that's all that really is to the deck, although what I actually might do is put in a Singleton Memorial to Genius while we're on the deck building screen, but otherwise this is the deck we're about to take into the event in a moment. Let me know what you think about the deck in the comments below, if you think it's worth including the 1 mana spells, whether you think Persistent Petitioners and Rat Colony should be cards that are legal in Singleton, because they do circumnavigate kind of the intent of the format, but again, it's a rule printed on the card, it's a rule Wizards has designed to override the rules of a format, so maybe that's okay. I can't imagine it's going to be oppressively powerful, but we're going to take it into some games and see how it does. So let's get right to it. Alright, we found our first opponent, Stephen A. Tapia, and we're jumping straight into the action with Persistent Petitioners in MTGA Storm the Citadel Singleton. So, 2 lands, 5 Petitioners. Think we keep this hand. We'd like to draw a couple more land to be able to start casting 2 Petitioners a turn, but as it stands, turn 5 we're going to get our first activation. We'll see how it goes from there. Being on the play is probably a bonus in terms of getting to deploy Petitioners 1 turn ahead of our opponent on the curve, and get those activations started 1 turn early as well. If we do end up with a 3rd land, our Persistent Petitioner that came into play on turn 2 will get to mill a single card on turn 3, however we do just draw another Petitioners instead. At this point our opponent probably knows what's going on with the deck, so let's see what happens. So Golgari Colours, we do draw the 3rd land, so we're going to deploy a Petitioner and get to mill a single card off our opponent's deck at end of turn, or if they try and remove the Petitioner. And that will take them to 50 cards in library, so assuming 2 more draw steps before the end of the game, we are going to get to mill our opponent out in 4 activations of the tap 4 ability. This does mean if our opponent's playing cards like Golgari Finebroker, that we are going to be putting cards into their graveyard for them to acquire some value from, but Finale of Eternity going into the graveyard is pretty great for us. With X being 3 on that card, it would have killed 3 Persistent Petitioners. As it stands, we get to pass the turn here, we have a mill 12 active, opponent's on a 4-turn clock. We also have 2 more Petitioners, so unless opponent has a sweeper, and Find Finality costs 6 coming out of this deck, it's likely we're going to get a few activations off these Petitioners before the worst does happen. Let's see what opponent wants to do. End of turn, obviously we're going to be doing our first mill 12. If opponent has a removal spell, we'll do it in response. Death Sprout. So in response, we will mill our opponent for 12. Having to manually tap the advisors is kind of a pain. So opponent does have a Multani in their graveyard now, but we did also hit Casualties of War, Ritual of Soot, so that's another removal spell in the graveyard. another mass removal spell, I should say, another sweeper in the graveyard. And opponent gets basic swamp. Okay, so we draw another Petitioners. We may as well run out 2 Petitioners here. We'll pass the turn. Once again, unless opponent has Find Finality, we're going to get to mill another 12 cards. Find Finality might have been a reason to hold one of the 2 Petitioners we played out, so we could try and rebuild to 4 after it, but we're playing Singleton. It's a 1 of in our opponent's deck, presumably. But we haven't seen it yet off the Petitioners, so maybe we should have played it safe there. We'll see. The fact opponent hasn't jammed anything makes me hopeful. If opponent has like Liliana, okay, so Vraska. Vraska's interesting. Vraska can only kill 1 of the Petitioners. Can only kill 1 of the Petitioners. So it might just be that we go for it and we just ignore the Vraska. We do get to attack Vraska with 1 Petitioner next turn, which stops a second activation. So that's beneficial. I'd like to see Find Finality go over into our opponent's graveyard here. What was there? Well, Liliana's good, Assassin's Trophy is good, Status Statue. Okay, so we have 4 Persistent Petitioners still in play. We can make 2 this turn. Opponent has 23 cards remaining. Given that we haven't seen Find Finality yet, it's possible that we just play out a Petitioners, attack Vraska for 1, and main phase this activation. So we'll play a Petitioner, like I said. Opponent gets priority because they have a treasure. Can't imagine they have a 1-mana play that impacts our game plan this game. Petitioners resolves, go to combat, send 1 Petitioner after Vraska, so Vraska can't use its ability again. And then we will activate 4 Advisors now. Like I said, we're looking to see Find Finality go into the graveyard. Maybe it doesn't make a difference. I don't think I saw it. Oh, we did. Find Finality is gone. So I can't think of another sweeper opponent could have here. So we didn't draw any of our spicy 1-mana cards, but demonstrating that against a deck like a mid-range deck where your opponent's not really doing much, Persistent Petitioners is a very fast clock, and opponent explodes, so that is the victory for the Persistent Petitioners. Okay, we're back in for another game with Persistent Petitioners, playing Cursequake, I think. Don't want to try and pronounce it. So 3 lands, 3 Petitioners, and a dive down. We'll keep. Hopefully we draw the 4th Petitioner. We'll see if the dive down was a worthwhile addition to the deck. And let's see what opponent is doing. Opponent plays a Plains Skymarcher Aspirant. So we're against an aggressive deck, but we do have the 4th Petitioner in hand. So hopefully this dissuades the Aspirant from attacking. If the Aspirant comes in, I don't think we block, because we can't really risk the Petitioner dying. Something like Knight's Pledge would make the decision easier for us. Okay, Adanto Vanguard, so opponent can't attack this turn, basically. Perfect, so we drew another Petitioners. I'd quite like to draw land next turn. We'll pass. We now do have Dive Down. We're still just going to take 3 off the Adanto Vanguard. But we'll see what opponent has. Land Benelish Marshal would be pretty strong. Kind of a constructed curve. Leonin Vanguard, however, is completely fine. That is acceptable. Bishop Soldier resolves. So opponent has some lifelink creatures, but they can't really do much against 1/3s. They can get in for 3 with the Vanguard. But if that's their only attack, it does mean we get to use our Petitioner to mill our opponent. No blocks, take 3. And then we will mill the top card of our opponent's library, which is a mountain. So they are actually red-white. Okay, so we draw the land. We can deploy 2 Petitioners here. So this is our clock. So if opponent has Mountain and something like Trumpet Blast, Mountain, something like Burn Bright, Inspired Charge, we could have a problem here. But otherwise, we are now on a 4 activation clock. We can also risk 1 Persistent Petitioners in combat. Okay, so opponent has Legion Warboss. That's fine. Snubhorn Sentry does have, what's the word? Has ascended. Our opponent has the City's Blessing. And there's a 1-1. Okay, if opponent attacks, though, we get to make informed blocks here, so I'm not too concerned. Opponent gets to attack with the Goblin. Snubhorn Sentry could come in as well. It does only trade for one of the... sorry, they played Snubhorn Sentry this turn. That's fine. So we're definitely going to pass to blockers. We're going to put one Petitioner on the Goblin. Do we care if our opponent pays 4 life? No, and I quite like to have the Petitioners able to block next turn. So what I'm thinking is we could put Petitioners on the Vanguard to save ourselves 3 life here. Opponent would have to pay 4 life, but we don't so much care about that. But I think, given we may want to double block something like Legion Warboss next turn, we can just take 5. We'll just elect to take 5 here. And because opponent really can't do anything pre-combat, we will activate our advisors now. Target our opponent. So like I said, we're looking to see Burn Bright, Trumpet Blast, Inspired Charge go into the graveyard off this activation, because then we know those horrible things aren't going to happen to us. Well, Cosmotronic Wave is a good hit. Heroic Reinforcements is a good hit. Okay, so we have 2 more Persistent Petitioners. So this means we can use 2 of them in a block. How many cards does opponent have? 36. Yeah, we'll just run out. We could just play 1 Petitioners and hold up Dive Down, because we're only drawing 1 card next turn, so we could draw 1 more Petitioner at most. So I think we actually just pass here. Milling 1 extra card isn't important, but I think having the +3 toughness could matter depending how this combat goes down. So let's see what happens. Vanguard and Legion Warboss trigger. We will resolve all of those abilities. So we're okay to risk at least 2 Persistent Petitioners here. Opponents not attacking with everything, which suggests they don't have Inspired Charge or Trumpet Blast. So we'll go for a triple block on the Snubhorn Sentry. So we can triple block on the Snubhorn Sentry because it would only trade for 1 of the Petitioners, which would still leave us with 4. We block 1 here. We could trade this Dive Down for 3 points of life by blocking the Adanto Vanguard and diving down. So I think that's a good plan. So what's being risked here? 2 Petitioners. Block. Okay, let's see what our opponent does. Opponent has to order these first. And then we'll go from there. So they're being ordered like this. So the question is, do we just pass? Opponent's making the Adanto Vanguard indestructible. We'll make this Petitioner big and hexproof. Just going to survive the combat. We will activate the ability to tap 4 advisors. Tapping this one, this one, this one, and this one. So I saw at least Rekindling Phoenix going over there. Okay, and then damage happens. So 1 of our Petitioners dies. We're still left with 4 for our activation. End of turn, we'll mill another card off our opponent's deck. What do we see? Aurelia. Okay, so we've drawn 2 more Petitioners. So again, we're just going to run out both Petitioners. We're 2 activations away from this game being over. We are at 10 life, but I think we're in okay shape. We just have to survive through this combat and get another activation in. Just have to survive combat, get another activation in. And opponent explodes. Fantastic. So 2-0 with Persistent Petitioners. You get quite quick wins with the deck. You're either going to know whether or not you're going to get the 4 advisors into play, and then your opponent's sort of on a 4-turn clock from there. The only time you might play against an opponent with more than 60 cards in the deck is the Mirror. But like I said, let me know what you think about Persistent Petitioners, about the deck, if you play it, if you change anything, if you think the 1 converted mana cost spells are a good addition to the deck, if you prefer to just play 2 more Persistent Petitioners in those slots. If you have anything to say, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video as well, please remember to subscribe. It'll let you know when more videos go live, and it lets me know that people are watching. But otherwise, Hope you have a fantastic day and hope you're still having fun playing the Storm the Citadel Singleton event, and I'll catch everyone next time.